Welcome to another episode of Real Wealth Podcast. I'm here with John Davenport Jr. of Davenport Engineering, and he is out of South Carolina, right?
No, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
North Carolina. See, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I've actually never been to either Carolinas, and so it's really hard for me to keep them straight. But sorry about that. I'm very ignorant.
North Carolina's the big brother. South Carolina's the little brother.
Right. Okay. All right. Big
I'm
brother.
sure they wouldn't appreciate that, but that's how we feel anyway.
All right. Of course. We're going to go
They
with
may
that.
have a different story about that, but we feel like we're the older brother. How about that?
No, that's perfect. We'll go with that. I just realized how deficient I am geographically in the South. Anyways,
All right.
But if I was in the South and I was driving on a road, there's a really good chance you guys engineered something about the road, right?
Possibility, yes, sir.
Okay, so you got your start working for a municipality, and then the really short story, not to diminish it at all, but you started your own firm, and now you have a flourishing firm. And along the lines, Mr. Davenport, has made a movie, and so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to explore that. This podcast is sponsored by Steward Wright, and so we're doing a rebrand. If you haven't heard that yet, we used to be Leading Edge Financial Planning. So John, tell us a little bit about your intro. If someone wanted to go watch a little bit of your story, it's on your website. But just give us the brief introduction to your journey of being a traffic engineer to the faith side of it, especially the faith side of it, of what led you to start your own firm, and then let's get into what the movie's about, because the movie was amazing. I loved seeing it, and I hope other listeners or other folks can get out there and enjoy it and be inspired themselves.
Well, thank you, Michael. I think for a lot of us, and early in my walk with the Lord, you have your faith, and then you have the things that go on in life. And when you're a young believer, your faith begins to attach to those things. But it takes time, right? Because, when you're young, I'm just going to trust God. But you don't even know what that means. So when I first started the company, what that meant was, and the story is all on my webpage, but prior to that, I was working for the state. I went to work for a consulting firm, but for a number of reasons, including the economy, I got laid off. I'd never been without a job before. 3 days after I got laid off, 9/11 happens. So essentially no one's hiring. So the fast forward through that is all of a sudden, now your faith gets joined with, I got to have a job and I got to take care of my family. Wife's pregnant, got 3 kids. So as you walk through that next year of God kind of taking me step by step, I wanted a job. I didn't want a business. I just needed to pay the bills. But, at some point it's like, I've got some skills. I'll just see if you can hire me for contract. That makes logical sense, right? Because no one was hiring for a job. And I was able to get some contracts going. And at some point I realized, hey, I'm in business. And I'm trying to compress all this down because it's really a long story. But at the end of the day, after a year of doing contracts, month to month, and seeing God's provision, which I had never had experience before, because working for government, I had to check every 2 weeks and know exactly to the penny how much it was and when it was going to be, right?
Right.
So after all that, I really saw God as the God of this business as well. And that's when that whole story of the firm being founded in generosity really began, because I saw that there was no way I could have made it through that situation without the Lord. And he was all over the business starting. It was his idea, not mine. And so that's really how we got the whole foundation of Davenport Engineering and how we became the firm that we are, just coming out of the ashes of 9/11 and not having opportunities any other way, and seeing God show up in a really big way.
Right. Yeah. And I'm excited to get to more talking about the growth journey of Davenport Engineering a little bit. Mm-hmm. But first, let's talk about the road less traveled by most, which is on the generosity side. So something that's really easy to do when we start making money, you go from, what your budget is to you have like what you talked about, paycheck to paycheck, month to month on the contract stuff, and then you get some traction starting your firm.
Hmm.
It's really easy to live into, oh, we got extra money, let's spend extra money. Like, you know, our times come, you
Hmm.
know, here we go, and live into that. So, could you share with us a little bit about, and this is going to be a little hard not to maybe give the whole movie away on the podcast, um,
Okay.
but so share what you like about what the impact was for you, how you came to the philosophy you did, and then I guess maybe even how that impacted your family and your coworkers and all that.
So I kind of fast forwarded over the year of that kind of what I would call manna provision, where God was sending a contract and it'd be just enough for a month, just enough for a month. Well, that was stripping down my self confidence, my
Mm.
ability to perform for myself. We had to live on very little, right? I remember people having. I tell the story in the film of people taking up uh, money for us to be able to pay for our groceries at church. I mean, so we
Wow.
had to live on very little. So yes, when things started coming in by the end of the year, we had extra funds, and I would just give it the grace of God, other than just my own volition. That when I saw some extra, I was just so overjoyed because I knew that it was Him. I mean, because I got a really close walk with the Lord walking through this, right?
Yeah.
There was no I put on, told him take this job and shove it and did it on my own. Like I knew that there was no way I was going to be where I was except for him. And out of gratitude, I decided I wanted to do something to worship through finance, which was different than tithing, right? Or just giving at church, putting something in the collection plate because somebody made you feel guilty or whatever. It was, I want to do this as an act of worship. And I did that, and I won't share too much because that's the film.
Yeah.
I did that with an individual ministry that is in Haiti, and through that connection, then really had an encounter with the Lord. Of the Lord was like, "Oh, you see how that works? Well, I'm going to show you really how you can make your business and your life be worship through giving."
Cool. You're you're right. Let actually, can we go back just a little bit? I'd like to
Sure.
explore a little bit more that year of the manna provision.
Hmm.
Out of curiosity, were there ever days where you prayed for money and it showed up and you didn't, it totally unanticipated?
Yes, there were both. So there were times when I thought that I needed more than I really needed.
Okay.
And then there were times that it came in and it was more than I thought I needed.
Okay.
So basically, it was that losing control. We and especially my personality type, you like to know, well, how much we're going to have. When are we going to have it?
Mm-hmm.
I like to plan. Everyone says you're supposed to have a plan. You're supposed to have a budget. I can't have a budget if I don't know how much money I'm going to make. I know how much I made last week. I don't know what I'm going to make next week. How do I have a budget with that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The budget is zero. We're going to spend as little as possible. Right?
Budget is
you
zero.
know, do we have money to buy groceries today? We do go buy groceries today. Tomorrow we'll see what the Lord provides. I mean, that's a humbling place to be, especially as an American, right? We like to be in control of things, but I had to walk through that, right? So
Yeah.
that was the journey. But what God was showing me was you can trust me in this area,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the big lesson that I learned over that year was you can trust me in this area. You, the three kids, your wife, and the one on the way can trust that I know exactly what you need and you will make it. And when I got to the end of the year, there was no other way we'd have got through that except with him.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a store I had bought some tires, and I guess tires they have rate them with different mileage. It was a 30,000 mile tire, 40,000. And I think I got 60,000 miles out of a 30,000 set of tire when I went to get tires. When I finally had the money to replace the tires, they were like, well, how do these tires last that long?
Hmm.
And it's kind of like I was reminded of that story in the Old Testament when the children of Israel were kind of going around in the wilderness and their shoes didn't wear out or whatever. It's like, that was how God provided. We didn't get money to buy the tires. He made the tires not wear out until I had the money to pay for them. So
Wow.
stories like that.
It is interesting how God knows exactly how to get to us.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, sometimes we have maybe a harder or more stubborn personality or spirit, which the superpower of that is you've got that fortitude once that faith is properly established and rooted to go do the things that he's got for you, which might be some bold things. And in your case, that is some of what that movie's about. But like how God knows how to condition us to loosen up the soil to what he wants to plant and grow.
Yes. And that was absolutely what he did. I did not know that that was what he was doing over the process. It wasn't comfortable. I wouldn't sign up for it again. But you come home. I mean, listen, you got a wife and she's pregnant. It's like, okay, what are we gonna do?
Seriously.
And it's like, we're gonna trust the Lord here, and she did. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she was a partner. But the bottom line is that if you're married, you understand that being starting something new and branching out when your wife is pregnant and needs to build a nest is probably not what I would put in the best things to do in the first few years of your marriage.
Hmm.
That would not be the advice. Hey, quit your job, start a business when your wife is pregnant and she's sitting at home with the other kids and trying to figure out y'all because she's already decided she's going to stay home with those. And so now she's not working and you've put her in a situation where we don't have income coming in.
Yeah.
So
How?
kudos to her for walking with us through that because she was a big part of that. She believed in me and she believed in God.
Yeah. My next question around that is knowing it was uncomfortable enough that you wouldn't volunteer for it again. What kept you in it? What kept you moving forward? What kept you from going off the rails?
Well, I would just say that the Lord gave me enough each waypoint, each month, whatever it was, to see that He was bringing me through it. So, as a younger believer, and when our faith is young, I think the Lord shows, we want to call them miracles.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's a miracle because God's in it. So, but you see it more. I think when you're younger in the faith, God allows you to see a little bit more of a quicker response in things than as we get older. It's like now it'd be like, well, you're just going to have to, trust me. You've
Yeah,
learned. So it's going to be a year. You just know who I am. Just be still and know that I'm God. That wasn't necessarily what I had to do for a year. I had to do it for a week, or for a month. And so it was learning almost like baby steps.
yeah,
Just trust me for today. Okay. Let's not worry about next year. Just trust me for right now. And so that was what kept me on the rails was he didn't ask more of me than I was capable of doing, and more that I believed that I was capable of doing. I mean, I didn't like it because I wanted to have a check and I wanted to know how much it was and I wanted to have a budget and a plan and all those things that you're supposed to. My wife is a financial planner. So you're
that's
sitting here
right.
like, well,
Yeah,
how are you planning stuff and we don't have any, but at the end of the day, just taking the one step at a time and the Lord like letting it be revealed that that's the right step was encouraging in my faith.
yeah,
And I think he does that, Michael. I mean, I think when we take a step of faith, it talks about even with tithing, it's the Lord says, test me in this and see if I will not open the heavens and pour out, a blessing. Like he's literally saying, I want you to see if I will actually do this. The thing is that you have to get out of the boat. You got like Peter. You got to get out of the boat. If you don't get out of the boat, you're not going to take one step at all, and
mm-hmm.
so therefore you never will experience how far you can walk on water before you sink.
Certainly.
But if the first step he started sinking, it had probably been I'm getting back in the boat, right? So the Lord let that first step work for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, give him a sense of how it can be.
That was an incentive. The first step worked, second step worked. Stopped working when he decided to take his eyes off the Lord. But he had already. I mean, the boldness was to get out of the boat to begin with and put his foot on the water. If he had put his foot on the water and it sank, he had immediately pulled it back in the boat. Never would have got out of it.
Mm-hmm. So share what you maybe what's appropriate about the movie, not to spoil the whole thing, but how. So you got out of the boat, you started doing contract. God worked I guess, established you in the way that you needed to be to go
Hmm.
down this path. Uh, what was, yeah, share what you want to share about the movie, uh, so we can get a sense of it, I guess, to the appropriate extent without spoiling the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many dynamics to the movie, so we've kind of gone over the opening scene of,
Mm-hmm.
well, how did you even get here? How did you get a business? And I think it goes without saying that, yes, there was plenty of in that first year, and maybe even the first few years, there were lots of things that happened. They were very confirming that, okay, this is going well. You're going in the direction God wants you to go. And so it's almost this cause and effect. You do this goes well. You do this goes well. But that's not the Christian walk in totality, right? So there's a section in the movie where you see that things don't necessarily go well because we're following the plan of God. And that's actually the plan of God also, because he's not always going to spoon feed you. At some point, you're going to get resistance right from the enemy. You're going to get things that are going to discourage you. And the film talks about that. There's some
That's right.
very dark areas that we had to walk through in health and losing family members and things that's happened to our business. I mean, we took it into a 5-minute segment maybe in the film, but it's much longer than that. And I think that's an important component, because if you just look at it as if, well, if you just do the formula, you give your money and or whatever, your time, whatever God's given to you, and it's just going to be great. I mean, that's just not the way it works. It's not to say that God's not going to bless you. We've been very blessed, and I don't have any regrets. I would not go back and do it any other way. I absolutely would rather have the battle scars of going in the direction God had for me than to not have those, because every lesson there was more of a deeper intimacy that I had with Him. But at the end of the day, the piece of generosity and all those things that come out of it, you have to look at it within the what's the word, within the light of a real world circumstance. You know, we went through the Great Recession of 2008, 2010, just like anybody else did. We suffered the loss of parents just like people do. We had sickness in our family just like anybody else did. So it's not like that somehow that this made us immune
Mm-hmm.
to the world.
Yeah, and I think even for the enemy, it just paints a bigger target on our back. There's
Yeah,
there's more to take down. There's more strategic advantage to taking you down. I mean, Ravi Zacharias comes to mind. Um, his, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but his
yeah,
legacy got very tainted after the fact. After he did a lot of good in the world, especially as a faith leader, and there's others that it's like you just get a bigger and bigger target on your back. More adverse, more is going to come against you when you're having an impact.
and I think hence the name Supply Line that
Yeah,
John came up with,
that's good.
because I even say this in the film again, not trying to give everything away, but the idea here is that when we do partner with the Lord, and I'll take it just a few steps back. So, as a believer, when you get saved, and maybe people don't tell you that at the altar, you just join the armed forces of the kingdom of God, right? You think, oh, well, I'm not going to hell. Okay, that's good. You join the armed forces of the kingdom of God. So you are now an enemy of the state, the Satan,
Mm-hmm.
who is the one trying to run this world. So then he's declared war on you, right? Whether you want to declare war on him or not, you wear a uniform and you're a target. So a soldier is just as much of a threat when they're in a boat on their way to the battlefield as they are in the battlefield. So that's the first thing that I had to really get my mind around. There isn't some neutral territory. We're not just out here having God's just making life great for us, and we die and go to heaven, right? But then when you decide to take up what God sets in front of you, your calling. So whether it is like Ravi Zachariah, which is his ministry, or the giving, or what you're doing with your podcast, when you begin to actually get on the enemy's hit list. So like it goes, I think about this story in the book of Acts where they're trying to cast out this demon and they're doing it in the name of Jesus or whatever. He's like, look, Jesus I know, And Paul I've heard of, but who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what they told these guys who are trying to cast out this demon. So they heard of Paul, right? Paul is on their list. Like they when they get their meeting together
That
and they're
is
like, all right,
interesting.
here are the people we're getting ready to go get. Like, all right, we got Paul, right? He's on the list.
Yeah. I've
I don't
never
even know
keyed
who
into
you
that.
are. Like,
That's a good
y'all aren't
point.
even a threat. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it
Mm-hmm.
gives you a dynamic of what the enemy, how he sees us. Like, Paul was a threat. Like, he is, they go into their war room and they got pictures of the people they're looking for. Paul's one of them. We're going to figure him out. These other guys, we ain't thinking about them because they're not even making a difference for the kingdom.
Yeah.
So, the more of a difference you're right that you're making, the more your face, your name, your family, everything that's associated with you becomes a target. And
Mm-hmm.
it absolutely makes sense if you think about it in terms of war, which is hard for us. But if you think about it in terms of a conflict, the best way to beat the enemy, if you're trying to beat somebody, is cut the supplies off. If the enemy cannot eat, has no ammunition, has no replenishing of supplies, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
It's that easy. They can be as good as they want to be. They have no supplies. And so part of our role in the kingdom is to supply folks that are doing these things overseas. And so if he can't defeat them and he's actually going against them as well, he definitely wants to cut off the supplies.
You want to talk about some of the work that's going on at this point that you guys are helping to get accomplished?
So I will try to, yeah, I'll talk about some of it. Some of these things are in countries that are sensitive.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to mention particular ministries because some of these countries have extreme opposition, right? One of the ones that we're going to be interacting with in the next week or so is in Uganda. So we have a clinic there, and that clinic is in a rural part of Uganda, and it serves a community there that doesn't have access to the basic medical care and the things that we get now. It's led by faith people, Christians, and so it's not just about giving out medicines and things of that nature. It's also about ministering to people that don't know who Christ is. Because, and I may mention this in the video as well, in the film as well, if you can give people things of this world, and that's nice. We can make your life more comfortable, and that's important. But when Jesus was here, he met the needs of people, but they also got the greater gift, which is salvation. And I think in the West, we sometimes salvation doesn't maybe seem as big of a deal. It's yeah, when I die, it's going to be good, but it's not all that bad now. Let's just be honest. I'm like, all right, it's not terrible, but when you're in a situation where it's like, and you go to these countries and all right, and I have to remind myself when I'm driving through these communities that this is not a backdrop to a film. Like these people
Right.
actually live in that shack, they live in that ditch. This is their food out of that garbage can. It really shakes you, and you really think differently about how you're going to reach these people. It's not, well, let's just set up a tent and start giving out food. I mean, maybe they eat for the day, but it doesn't change their situation. It's only the gospel that does that. So we have Uganda. We do have some projects in Haiti that we're working on. We've got projects in Zambia, where we've done Wales, Botswana. So there, I think we have something on. I was counting the different continents, 4 or 5 of the continents we've got projects on right
Wow.
now, as well as locally. We haven't forgotten the situations that go on locally as well, and so we fund those as well. Everything that we try to get behind with our organization ultimately needs to have the gospel tied to it. That's just kind of the standard for us, and so that's an important piece for us.
Cool. Well, what would be maybe one takeaway from your journey of you did this film, you go through the creative process of telling the story.
Hmm.
What was maybe something that came up that you didn't expect, or something that got highlighted, or something clicked through this process?
Well, what I can tell you is this, Michael. I didn't. So when gospel patrons reached out to me, which I didn't reach out to them, it was their idea to do the film. It was going to be a 10 to 15 minute maximum kind of. They've done a, they've done 10 of these films, right?
Mm-hmm.
Short ones.
Yeah.
And so they saw this as another short film. and they just wanted to. They had seen something we put online as a company, and they were like, "Hey, let's just tell the story a little bit longer. You can't capture it in 2 minutes. Let's capture it in 10 minutes." Well, the thing that came out of it for me was when they began to interview me and ask me the different phases and stories of my life. I had not seen and put all together all the things God was doing, all those
Mm.
stories that we're talking about now. They didn't make. They just seemed like they were individual chapters.
Right.
They didn't make any sense. But then when this third party comes together and we start putting together the film, and then you watch it and it's like, oh, I see what God was up to. Like, I think I get a glimpse of the way heaven's going to be when we do get to see the Lord, and you don't, there's so many things you don't understand. And then when you see it all together, it's going to be like, oh, that makes sense now. I mean, just you can look at a difficult situation like when we talk about the death of my parents, which were 18 months apart and all that,
Mm.
and it's shown in the film. I mean, that was a terrible season, but I can look back at it now and see exactly how it fits into the story. You know what I'm saying? And I can tell that as part of the story, but in the time I was experiencing it, I'm like, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what it did was help me to really get a bigger picture of, okay, we zoom back a lot. Most people don't get that in their life. I didn't expect it in mine either, where someone takes a kind of a 40,000-foot view of your life and shows it to you and says, oh, look at that. And then then you can begin to see God in all of it. Doesn't make sense when you're living it, but it starts to make sense when someone captures it and you look at it on screen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I still got some hanging questions in my own life of, all right, God, I don't know what the plan is here, but I guess I'll find out someday.
Well, I've got new questions since the film was made. I mean, that's just the way life works, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but I think that what it does help me to understand though is that the same way that I understood early on that God was going to provide next week for the groceries and the week after that to pay the mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
that you can trust him that this story is going to make sense at the end, even though there's turns and bends that make absolutely no sense. He's already promised he's going to work all of that out for our good.
Okay. Well, how about I'll show the preview real quick. I'll do a little share on here,
Okay.
and then we'll transition to talking about Davenport Engineering.
Okay. Cool. I was the first one in my family to actually graduate from high school. All I wanted was a job. God's vision was a business. We prospered in all areas, the family, the business, the giving, all those things were flowing. But that's just not the way things always go. There was always one more thing. It's like, what else is going to happen? I felt like the Lord spoke to my heart and said, why would you be surprised when he's bringing things to try to discourage you, to try to keep you from doing what I've called you to do? He wants to stop what's going through you. I want you to be the supply line. Am I ever going to retire? I don't see that. I'm clear and understand now that I'm created for a kingdom purpose, and so I'm going to live that out.
Cool. I'm excited for the premiere.
Yep.
This is a powerful
I am
movie,
too.
and yeah, I think it's going to inspire a lot of people. Get folks questioning, especially whether someone's on the upswing, they've got economic potential, or they're living in especially economic flourishing space, but really question, okay, lifestyle, how do we balance this? How do we make choices for what matters, what counts, what fulfills what we're called to, and I'm talking about people of faith specifically.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'm excited for it. I think you've your story is going to help a lot of people too. Here stateside to help even more people. All right. So I'm going to share a shot of your website at least. All right. So you've been around for 20 years. So
Yes.
it's not a new firm. You're very established. How many do you have working at Davenport Engineering?
Somewhere between 40 and 50.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. How many engineers?
I would say we're probably 75% engineers.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a serious firm. So so tell me about, because going from taking contract work to that many engineers, I mean, so you obviously have departments now. You have
Yes.
developed departments
Hmm.
that do their own refined business functions at this point, because you can't make it to that size without figuring that stuff out.
Right.
How, if there was a tie between like your faith journey, um, excellence in your craft, in your work,
Hmm.
and then figuring out, going through that learning curve of, just because you're an engineer doesn't mean that you know how to that you have entrepreneurial experience or know how to run a business. There is a
Hmm.
lot to learn, going from taking contracts to leading a firm and leading culture, winning the size of business that it takes to feed that many families, and having the kind of reputation as well that's going to win those kind of contracts. So I'm really interested in how you have experienced that firsthand. Your view of from here to 20 years, it's a mature firm, very mature firm. What would you like to share about that? I mean, maybe just as a starting point.
Well, I mean, I'm going to give a shout out to an organization I've been a member of for let's see, 17, 18 years, which is C12.
Okay,
Uh, so,
I've heard good things
yeah,
about C12.
yeah.
We
So,
don't we don't have a chapter here. Um, actually, oh, I don't. I have a green screen behind me. No, never mind. It's not a green screen. It's whatever's on the thing. But um, no. So one of our other guests, and I'm his man. I got his name on something. I know I've got something around here. Maybe not line of sight, but um, yeah, another guest. It'll come to me. But yeah, he was talking about starting a C12 or trying to get a guy to take up starting a C12 chapter. So that's really great to hear that was critical. Okay, right on.
that was critical. So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Started the business not because I wanted to start a business, but out of necessity. It became a business. After that first year, need to hire people, and you're an entrepreneur and you don't know much. Who are you going to hire? Your best friend if they're not working, someone in the community group, someone you've hung out with. Someone basically it comes down to in the early stages of an entrepreneurial opportunity, you bring in people that you trust. Trust is the number
Mhm.
one factor. Competency is second. Trust is number one. I trust you. I trust you to handle my money and not steal it. I trust you to make sure my reputation is good. So,
Mm.
you begin to hire people around you that way, and things went well. And so you think you're a great, I'm running a great business.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, before C12 entered into the equation, I was an engineer working in my business. I wasn't a business owner, and I didn't really know how to scale the company to where I could get the results I actually wanted without having to micromanage everything. That
Mm.
makes sense because what happens is once you begin to let go of that control and it's no longer your best friend or college buddy or your wife or a spouse, whatever. It's you're gonna be. It's you actually bring in people you don't know, and then you got to vet them and make sure you can trust them and all that. That's when you really need that outside support from an organization like C12. I didn't have an MBA. Their material on a weekly basis really challenged me to become the kind of professional that I need to be, and because they have segments on different components of your business,
Okay.
and it really helped me to think. They provide the support. They they were a great organization. Now, every business can't do that because you have to be a certain size to do it. So, certainly I would say to anyone that's an entrepreneur, you still need to have someone who's already walked through that can help you along the way. If your desire is to do it as a God honoring business, then you need to find someone that's already done it that way,
Yeah.
right? And because it's not just about the fact that we love the Lord. Like, you still have to be excellent, like you said, Michael. You still have to do all those things, because you can put the fish on the door or whatever, and then you do a terrible projects. You're basically being a negative influence in the kingdom, if you will, to
Right.
people coming to Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's an accountability factor that we've all got to take seriously in that space
Hmm.
because, yeah, don't go turning people away, claiming uh, claiming stuff you're not really doing.
Right. And it's easy to say it. It's a challenge to live it out.
Hmm.
And the philosophy of C12, and is part of what we've adopted, is that if you think about a pastor, and I've told pastor friends that the you have them, the people, the community, those that actually would actually go to church, because most people don't nowadays, right? You have them for about an hour a week on Sunday, maybe, if they're watching it online or whatever. We have the community 40 hours a week minimum. And so, from a C12 perspective and from our perspective, it is okay. These, you might be the only believers that they actually see. Like, there's a lot of opportunity there. How are you going to live and carry yourself and run your organization and treat people and all those things that go along? People have their idea of what a Christian company should be.
Hmm.
What does that even mean? Like, what's my experience going to be? Is it going to be different than working from some other company, or is it going to be the exact same, or is it going to be worse? And am I going to feel like, you know, you're trying to compel me to be something? Am I going to feel pressure? So all those things come into play. And that's where an organization like C12 was very helpful, to help answer some of the questions that we had to navigate as we grew to the size that we are now.
Cool. Did you have a business coach or a mentor through this, or is that part of the system, or did you? I guess did you have a business mentor?
I think most of that came from C12 once I
Okay.
joined. Before then, I have, and still do have, mentors that are in my life about just a number of things, not just business, but the specifically exclusive business came through C12.
All right. Pete Oaks. Pete Oaks. So he was one of my earlier podcasts, and but he's a good guy. He's got some stuff out there. But so it came. I knew it'd come to me. Just gotta
Hmm.
give it a minute. Okay. So C12. Now, what size of business should you be before you go diving into a program like C12?
I don't remember what the criteria. They have a revenue criteria that is suggested. I think it's been adjusted downward over time, and staff, but I don't remember those numbers. I mean,
Okay.
I yeah.
We can
Since
put a
I'm
link
not
in the show
chair,
notes.
yeah, it'd be better to put a link in there. I mean,
Yeah.
you're if you're just starting your business, it's probably not where you need to go. Um, they probably have some resources on their page that point you to people that are in that phase of their business. But you need to have some traction and revenue. 'Cause it's not inexpensive, and it's intentionally that way. I mean, you've got to be able to take a day off. I just left my monthly meeting yesterday. You got to be a day with other business owners going over material
So
and
you're
to
still in
remind.
C12.
Ah, yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long have you? Is it a long standing group of the same guys who run together, or women, men, whatever, that join up and run together, or does it ebb and flow? Do you switch
We've
groups? Do you reform group?
we've had some that come and go. I mean, people don't stay forever. I mean, the economy impacts people.
Hmm.
People sell businesses. People retire.
Right.
So there are a number of different things that influence people's attendance or membership of C12.
Okay.
But I've got some friends that I've met and have walked with the entire time I've been in the organization.
What do you think is the most critical lesson C12 has taught you?
I would say, as an entrepreneur, the most critical thing is that when you okay, so this is going to be the disease that most entrepreneurs get. You start something, it's successful. You're the only one that knows how to do it
Mm-hmm.
right. And depending on how long you can stay in that mode, the company can get really large. I know some really large companies that still orbit around one personality. The thing that C12 taught me was the most important thing was, if the company is no bigger than, or your organization is no bigger than your own personal energy and vision, then you are a limiting factor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way God created us, quite honestly. We are all need each other. And I learned that there are people that are gifted in areas that I'm not gifted in. And if I bring those people around and I let go of the things I think I need to control and the things that I think I'm better at than anybody else, and I trust other people, it can actually grow and be even a more effective organization. And but that's really hard for people, especially if you're a type A entrepreneur. It's just you talk to them and it's like, they're going to get it wrong if I'm not there. They might, but if again, type A entrepreneurs, we take ourselves way too serious. Way too serious. That's probably why I had to go through that series of manna, by the way, so the Lord could show me you didn't have anything to do with this. I did it. So good. Now that we've settled everything about that, let's go ahead and grow. I'm going to show you how I'm going to grow you.
Yeah. So something I do pick up from you is that you have grown in a lot of different. I didn't know you 20 years ago. Obviously,
Hmm.
we only met in January, February at the Kingdom Advisors Conference where you premiered your movie, um, or previewed. I guess previewed is the term.
Yes. Preview.
Um, but you've to me you've obviously grown in self-awareness to a high degree. What did you do to work on your self-awareness, or how you're wired, and really get in touch with that? Because to give up control, you actually have to learn how you're wired so you can even learn how to give it up, or even how you're holding on to control.
Yeah. So whether it's C12 or any other group, you have to have, and what works for me for C12 is you have other CEOs. You have to have people who are in your life that are willing to look you square in the face and not just tell you what you want to hear, right? They got to tell you what you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but the part that sets up a lot of strong, powerful, and I can name people, if I name them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The fewer people you have in your life that aren't on your payroll, that aren't in your pocket, that aren't intimidated by you, that are going to be willing to tell you the truth about yourself, the more in the danger zone you get
Mm-hmm.
in terms of being able to really grow. Because if you have all the power, no one can tell you anything.
Right.
And so being in these groups, I had groups, I have the mentors, I've got men that are older than me that can look me in the eye and say, John, that's not a good idea. John, what's the real motive here? John, what are you really trying to accomplish? And you have those people in your
Yeah.
life, and that helps you to grow to what I'm talking. And then of course, I have the Lord that says that also. But I mean, you have to put people in bumpers in your place, in place that will tell you what you don't want to hear. Otherwise, you're not going to grow.
It's easy to hear what you want to hear.
Yeah, and especially if you're successful, people don't. No one wants to. You know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I can, like I said, you could begin to start naming names of popular people. in culture right now that you can tell they have rarely had someone tell them that they're wrong. There's probably no one in their life that can tell them that they're wrong now, and and that they need to grow in a certain area. And when you get that way, you really aren't growing.
And then you've proved it to yourself. You've bought into it.
Yeah,
That's and then that's how you're successful, and it just feeds on itself. But um, frankly, it sounds exhausting because then for every success and every failure, it was you,
yeah.
including every especially every failure. And it takes a toll. So even if a failure in God's plan is strategic, you're still taking it as a total loss.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer that you learn by losing. You know, the success of this company has been built on many opportunities and contracts that were lost. In my life, there's been many things that didn't go well. So you learn perseverance when you don't get the immediate yes, when you get the no, when you get the rejections, that you can determine how you're going to respond to that. And if you take that to the Lord and you're encouraged and you go back and you learn from it, then you grow. But yeah, these last 10 years, I've really had to do a lot of self reflection on the challenges that I've gone through, and you become self aware. You're like, okay, this is how I am. This is actually who I am. This is what I think. This is what I want. The Lord has really good ways of stripping off the things that need to be stripped off if we're willing to let Him do it. It's painful. I'm gonna lie, it's painful.
Yeah. So talk about if you're going through something that is painful, or are you asking yourself the question of like, all right, God, what are you trying to do now? Or I mean, yeah, how do you take that in, knowing that so many times you've gone through painful things that have actually been for your good? Has that impacted how you process it on a regular basis now, or where are you at on that?
I wish I would say that when something painful comes that I'm just like, oh yes, I'm rejoicing now. This is going to be a good thing for me in the future. That's not how I feel at the time. I'm like, I need it gone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired. I just went through that. Why is this here? I need to go. I'm not some guy floating on a cloud that somehow rejoices when things don't go well. I have my moments. I have to come before the Lord. But what I have learned in all that is that that's kind of where you get real humility and intimacy with the Lord when you're just like, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you read Psalms. I mean, David was full of that. I mean, you read the stuff like, how did you, Lord, even let him write that? You want to curse his children, his children's children? They didn't have anything to do with what this guy did to you. Why would you? That's going a little bit up, a little bit far, right? To do those kind of things. And he was just in his emotions, or people say in his feelings, right?
Yeah,
For that moment. But I think that, that's I think God can appreciate that when we're transparent and we're real. Like, you know what? I don't like that. I didn't like that. I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense. I'm going to trust you, but I don't like it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, and until you get to the point where I know some people, they're graduate level or PhD level. They can, praise the Lord. And my car broke down, but there's a blessing coming. My car broke down. I missed the meeting. Lord, I know you're gonna fix it, but I'm not happy because the car broke down.
well,
I mean, yes, you're praying. This word talks about praying in the Spirit all the time. You're praying. You're communicating with the Father. You're recognizing who He is. You're taking it to Him, and you're letting Him work with you where you are.
that is wonderful. I hope someday I can genuinely get to that space. For now, I think I'd be like, maybe I'm a little disillusioned here. I don't know, but not living in reality. But no, that's a wonderful place. I'd love to be some days. For every problem that comes along, all right, where's the blessing? Let's find it. And
Yeah.
it takes me a little longer to get back to that. But yeah.
I don't live there, and the thing is, because I've had some things that happened that have really shaken. We all have pillars in our life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whether we recognize them or not, when people say Christians, I'm not talking about non-Christians. Yeah, they have pillars too. Non-Christians do. We say, okay, all I need is Jesus. That is factual and it's true, intellectually, but
Hmm.
in reality, that's not what we really mean. Because if the things that we say that we don't need were taken away, we would have a different perspective, right? So you say that because well, I got my wife at home and the kids or whatever it is. I got food in the groceries, food in my refrigerator, but all I need is Jesus. Well, what if you didn't have food in the refrigerator? You need some food. And Jesus had to put the food in your refrigerator. You might have, at some point, you're going to have a problem with Jesus.
Hmm.
I mean, let's be in reality. I mean, that's how you're going to feel. Either you're going to say that I've sinned and Jesus hadn't put food in the refrigerator, or somehow God hasn't been as good as His word and I'm hungry.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the Christian walk, right? And as you go through those areas of challenge, the thing is, I want to, in my mind, the first thing is I want to graduate to where it doesn't bother me, and I realize, you know what? I hear more what Paul says when he talks about rejoicing in his weaknesses because he can see God bigger. I'm kind of paraphrasing it. I get that now. I'm never going to be okay with things not going the way I want them to be. I'm never going to wake up, but I didn't go that way. I'm not. Paul didn't like it,
Hmm.
but the fact that I'm weak and that I know that Jesus is interceding with the Father and that He's like, look, the Scripture says, He knows that we're dust. He knows our frame. So, Lord, you know the guys. We understand. That's why He died on the cross. I mean, that's what grace really is. But you don't experience that until you actually are willing to walk through what I call the dark room and the things where you're disappointed where the Lord didn't move the way you thought He was going to move. Unless you have those conversations with Him and they're raw, you can't grow. And I think I've kind of taken you in a direction, but really what this film is about and these stories are about going into areas that we don't want to go into and being challenged and walking out of it, having that debate with God. Because a lot of times, if it doesn't line up with your theology, you just wrap it up in a box and walk away from it, and you don't deal with it, and it just sits there.
Yeah.
Or worse, you go back to your old way and run from it, and go back to doing what your own. Well, I'm just going to do it what I always do, which is go back to doing this. So you quit, which is what the enemy wants you to do. You quit. You don't go to the dark room. You don't get the testimony. You quit. You go back to doing what's familiar. You go back to fishing right after Jesus was, crucified. Well, we're just going back to fishing. That's what we've known. We've always known it. And so we're going to go back to doing what we used to do.
Mm.
And actually, there was in that season when I had lost the job and all that, I actually applied to go back to the state. I didn't want to. I was like, but I don't have a job. And my wife's, pregnant and all that. I'm going to put in some applications because no one's hiring. And it was a huge swallow of pride to put in that I want to go back to the organization that I left. Didn't leave on bad terms, but I didn't want to go back because I had going to this consulting firm. I thought I was taking a step up, so now I feel like I'm taking a step back. And interestingly enough, when they called me for an interview, I was probably 4 months into this contract process that the Lord, the manna, and I had gotten enough confidence in the manna to where I said, you know what, I appreciate your call. Thank you so much for considering me. I think I'm gonna keep on in the direction I'm going. But I could have quit,
Hmm.
and if I had, we wouldn't be talking now.
Right.
And a lot of people probably would have told me take the job.
Yeah. Do the responsible thing
Yep.
is how that messaging can be packaged.
Do the responsible thing. Go back to Egypt. At least in Egypt, we had leeks and whatever else they were eating there. They got out in the wilderness. Lord, you brought us out here to die.
Hmm.
You brought us out here to die, Lord. And that's not what He was doing. That's what the enemy was saying. The Lord was taking them to the promised land. He'd already told them that. But they were, you brought us out here to die. And that's where that is the tension, right? You got to get through that Red Sea, that wilderness moment where it's like, I don't know how you're going to do it, Lord. If you do that, the blessing is in the promised land.
And for them, it took a generation
Yep,
to recalibrate, to
it
learn
did.
dependence.
It did.
So how do you see your faith walk, connecting to the culture at Davenport Engineering. You mentioned C12 taught you maybe how to navigate some of those issues, but what's that connection look like at your firm?
So if you work here, it's going to be obvious that we're different. I mean, you started this podcast. Before we started, we prayed. We do. We start every morning. We have everybody on the Zoom call. We pray. People used to pray before football games and whatever, so it's not necessarily so odd. But then the culture piece of it is it becomes part of our core values, and we're not using scriptures. We're not saying Matthew this, that, and Luke and John. We're saying here are the things that represent who we are. We do what we say we're going to do. We're a team. We have trust-based relationships. We talk about these things that really are the kind of fruit that you should see from people who are Christians and work together. And then we hold ourselves accountable for that. So you're going to walk in, you're going to feel a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not playing Christian worship music in the hallway so that you got to get saved or you can't be here. That's not how it is. Um, what we want to have is an
And you're
organization.
not just saying that for the employment law attorneys.
Right. Yeah, exactly. One thing the attorneys say is if you let people know up front what they're experiencing up front, you say it,
Mm-hmm.
then you're okay. Like if you tell them, so if you were to apply, we'd pre-screen, we're going to let you know this is what kind of company we are. These are the things that we
Yeah.
do. And if you're okay with that, then fine. If you're not, we understand. And, but now that doesn't mean that we hide our faith. But for me, the faith isn't just preaching. It is about how you live and what you do with that faith. I mean, my faith is useless if people see me cheating as the leader. They see me cheating clients. What does that do to the witness of this firm is a God honoring firm, but they just cheated the client?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's you can't have that two-sided coin where do what I say and not what I do. Like, and if I say something, then I have moments where I may have said something wrong. May not have said the nicest thing to the employee. I gotta apologize. I mean, because they're looking at you like, okay, well, you just you were wrong. Like I gotta take responsibility for that. Because
Yeah.
the thing is, you're not perfect, but you gotta take responsibility. But that helps people draw near to folks who are Christians because the stereotype is you guys are hypocrites.
Yeah. Well, I guess if only Christians could be perfect people all of a sudden, that'd make it a lot easier.
I think it'd be hard. If you're perfect people, people would be afraid of Christians. I think what draws a person to Christ is someone who's not perfect because they know they're not perfect, but they can see that God's working in them. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I'm sorry. I just meant more of
I know
a.
what you mean.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just
Okay.
saying it's
Yeah.
like
No,
you
I agree.
stumble.
You
I'm
can't.
gonna mess up. I'm gonna say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make mistakes. It's how am I gonna handle it? Am I gonna handle it like a worldly person, or am I gonna handle it like someone who belongs to Jesus?
Yeah, like
I think
we're
that's the biggest difference.
we're looking over Father's things that He entrusted to us, and it's whether it's a family business or the family but it's like it's not our personal stuff. It's not we're taking care of it. We're being a witness. We're how are we holding out the family, and yeah. So definitely not perfect people, and that's the struggle. Is we gotta wrestle with that ourselves. On okay, well that wasn't great. Why'd that come up again? Or
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and learn to be humble and apologize and go own it.
Yep.
John, what's maybe the best? So you did C12, but just over the course of your 20 years of business, what's the best business advice that you could give somebody who is is getting into business and learning what to do, how to grow.
Okay, so the first thing I would say, which I don't want to be overly spiritual, but the truth of the matter is that the Bible says that we are to commit our ways to the Lord. So you need to prayerfully consider which direction that you should go. So you're going to get financial advisors, you're going to get all kinds of attorneys, legal people. You can get all that advice. The Bible talks about that there's, that's a good thing to get all those different comments. But ultimately, spend that time in prayer and let Him check your heart and let Him show you, is this the right thing to do or not? That's first of all.
Hmm.
So that's kind of it's a big idea that is a challenge, but it's fundamental. Once you do that and you set your compass, the other piece is then to decide, what am I going to be in the marketplace? Like, you can't let the marketplace define you. You've got to decide, um, all right, these are the things that I know I can do well. These are the things that I could do, but I'm not going to do great at them. So I'm going to let that go somewhere else, because the tendency is wherever the money is to kind of move along with it. And if you let that drive your business model, and that's not to say you're not don't need to be flexible, but if your number one objective is, I'm going to go into it just to make money, you're going to ultimately make some pretty bad decisions. Like, I think everyone has giftings, and so you have to stay within the giftings. There's people that make money running banks. I'm not a banker. I don't care how much money is to be made in banking. I'm not a banker. I'm not going to try to start a bank. I'm not going to try to do a lot of things. I'm not going to try to own a professional athlete, professional team, football, basketball. I mean, there's just things I don't get, right? I have to stay within my lane, which is another piece that I would say is to understand what is it God has for you. It took me a while to get that, because I would meet people and they're like, okay, so when are you going to get 100 people? When are you going to get 200 people? And for a long time, I thought, gosh, they've been in business this long. Maybe we should have this many people. And then it became clear to me that that was that's kind of the world's view of growth.
Hmm.
And what if, and I had to ask myself this question, have this conversation with the Lord, what if you have 40 to 50 people and you love working with them and you're making good money? Like, what's wrong with that? Why do you need 200? And you can do all things I've called you to do, and you still have time to be with your family. Like, why do you need 200? What is the number 200? Why do you need to be global? Why do you need to be, national? Why does that need to be a goal?
I mean, your website is davenportworld.com, though.
Yeah, it sounds bigger than it is. I mean, well, we're not, but so big, right? But the question is, and we have been bigger. But the question is, as I sat down and had those conversations, is like, how big do you need to be, and where do you need to provide your services?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Out of curiosity, how how much in projects do you guys do per year? If you're able to share that, I don't even know if that's something you want to share.
You're talking about revenue?
No, no, just so you're an engineering firm, you're a traffic
Hmm.
engineering firm, like touching. So I was on Goddard City Council for a few years. It's a small 5,000 community, but we worked with the traffic engineers on the different intersections and design and all that stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but so that there's a few $1 million of projects that happened over that course of time. But I know you guys touch different projects, and if it's a
Hmm.
state level or like interstate highway, or whatever, I was just kind of curious if you had a feel for how much in projects you guys actually touch for the project size itself, not your revenue, just.
I mean, we have projects that range from private sector developers that are doing a small convenience store to a privately owned development that's 4,000 acres, or and 10,000 homes or something, like a small city
Mm-hmm.
that we're involved in on the public side. We do work with the Department of Transportation, where we're planning greenways all the way up to interchanges where two freeways come together. So we have, a broad range of projects that we do.
Right. And then those would be
Mhm.
maybe up to a couple 100 million for those freeway interchanges
The
or
interchange, yeah,
sections.
it was probably, I think the one that we did was probably $300 million is what it would have been to construct it back in the time when we provided the estimate.
Yeah.
That's
Cool.
not our fee.
Right. No, but that's a lot of work. I mean, you guys are touching a lot of real estate, a lot of materials, and
Hmm.
um, yeah. So for you guys, for the excellence in the firm and the quality of the firm is far more important. Just by way of how much you're touching, how much you're influencing. You got to do a good job, or um, people kind of pay for it through extra wear and tear on their car or not being able to get where they want to go quickly, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned in the opening that you talked about if you traveled in North Carolina, you would probably touch some of our work. For over the 23 years or 22 years we've been in business, especially in the major cities, I mean, that is absolutely true. You likely will, if you spend any time in that city, come in touch with at least one project that we've been involved in.
Cool. Okay.
I mean, if you fly here, you're gonna the three major airports. We work for all three of them. So
Oh, okay.
when you
Right.
get off the airplane, you've already worked through one of our projects, whether it's RDU, Charlotte, or BTI, Greensboro, ILM, Wilmington. We've done work for all four of those airports.
Cool. Okay.
Yep.
Well, John, we've been talking for a little while now.
Mm.
You see how easy it is to just talk?
Oh, I had one more piece of advice too, but
Go
people
for it.
don't like this one as far as the business. Stay out of debt.
Stay out of debt.
Yep, that's a hard but simple one. And we got our friend Dave Ramsey who's debt averse. I mean, he had a lot of influence when I was really starting the company years and years and years ago. We have zero debt, and we've grown it on virtually no debt at all. And so, because of that, it puts you in a significantly different position to be able to give, to be able to weather recessions, to be able to take these blows, because we don't have any debt.
Yeah, I can see how that reduces your financial risk profile a lot.
Oh, it does. And we don't have any debt. You mean we don't have any debt? I mean, it's just that simple.
Hmm. What What do you think that's afforded you as you've run your business that way? I mean, compared to if you did have debt, if you were running a debt to equity ratio to optimize, workforce or whatever you're trying to do. But how's that changed the formula in business for you?
There's two things I can say that it's changed significantly: how and how much we give. Because if I give $10,000, for example, it's I see it. It's in the bank. It's
Hmm.
gone. Everything else is paid for, right? I already have all my everything, as far as what I owe. So I have my reoccurring expenses, but I can give $10,000 and not necessarily be worried about it because I already have complete control over those things, that the numbers that are there, because it's already cash, right? It's already liquid. So I'm not having to worry about that. But also, um, what it did, and this was even more valuable in very difficult times. So the 2000, um, in April of 2019, one of the largest projects we had got paused and ultimately canceled. That was a third of our revenue. In August of 2019, NCDOT, this North Carolina Department of Transportation here locally, had a major funding crisis and had to stop all their design work. And then by the beginning of 2020, you had COVID and everything was shut down. And so we were left with about 20 to 25% of our business. And while that was extremely painful, we didn't have any debt.
Hmm.
And so I could go off the payroll. And I did that in 2008, and I did it then. I can just go completely off the payroll. Um, we can scale down our expenses to just what it takes to get through. and that number is a lot smaller if you don't have any debt, right? It's a much smaller number when you, because all the expenses other than rent, you can, everything else is controllable when you don't have debt, right? So if I don't, other than the rent I'm paying for the office spaces, I can adjust everything else. So it's helped us to weather some of the most adverse situations you can think of in terms of what companies would go through and still survive.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for sharing the firsthand experience of running a debt-free company.
It's I know it's hard in everyone's business. You can't do that if you're going to real estate unless you, someone blesses you with $10 million to get started. You're going to probably have to borrow some money to buy property, and there's always capital that you need. But the idea, the American way of leverage it, leverage it, leverage it, is what I'm saying is you want to keep that down to a minimal.
Yeah.
And if you can be zero, be zero. I mean, that needs to be like, I have a zero. We don't want to write off any hours. People say, well, you always have write off of hours. You know what? That's just like saying you're always going to have a car payment. Let's set the mindset that we want to have a car one day that we don't have to pay for with payments. We want to pay cash for it, even if it's $10,000 and it's a used car. You own it. You
Mm-hmm.
got the title in your safe at home. At least do that versus a $50,000 car the bank owns. And I'm starting to sound like Dave, but I mean, it is that mindset when you're trying to early on start a business. Is, we, because we didn't have a lot of debt, because I didn't go into debt. I mean, I bought my furniture. We went down to Lowe's. I bought cinder blocks and doors and made desk out of them. Cinder blocks and a door makes a good desk. I
All
didn't
right.
go down to the, office whatever, and pull out the credit card and buy $50,000 worth of furniture so we could look nice and be fancy. I was like, you know what? I can get a chair from Walmart, and we put that thing together and build these desks, and that will be sufficient for now.
Cool. All right. You have a closing thought for us?
Well, I would just say thank you for having me on. I mean, there's so much to the different things we've talked about. I mean, it's intertwined. I mean, because we're not in debt, we have more to give. We're not overspending. Um, and understanding that the business that we have belongs to the Lord, and He's able to do what He wants to do with it, has allowed us to be able to tell this story that's going to be released on October the 26th. And it's His story; it's not mine. When I look at it, and I saw all the different characters, it's just, I think I liken it to, I use word pictures. I liken it to the last play of the Super Bowl, where the hero scores the winning touchdown, and we like to look at the hero and celebrate the hero. How many plays, how many games, how many practices had to happen to get that hero to where they could score that touchdown? And I felt like that with the film. Okay, there's the film, is for the glory of the Lord, but I'm going to tell you what, there were a lot of people who had to block, tackle, pass. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of games were played for me to get to that point, and I can't, by any stretch of my imagination, take credit for scoring a touchdown for one game when I didn't have to play in any of the games to get to that game. And in fact, I just got to be the one that got handed the ball. In this case, the story. So that's the way I look at it with that film. It's not about me. It's about the God, what He's doing. There's going to be other things that come from this film. I hope that there'll be greater stories than this film. Because if the greatest story is that this film gets done, then it was a waste of time, right? I hope that there'll be stories 2 decades from now of people that said, just like I say about C12. C12 was somebody's vision, Buck Jacobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about C12 as a footnote in my story. But Buck Jacobs, it was a vision that we would have businesses like this. He probably had no idea that this business would do what it's done globally, and that we'd be doing this film. I hope that 20 years from now, someone's sitting there in front of you or your successor, and they're telling a story about how they saw a film 20 years ago that inspired to do this, and this is why they're doing that. Then
Yeah.
we're part of the kingdom work.
Yeah. Right. Wonderful. Yeah. So, what's the next story going to be? And I
Yeah.
hope your story inspires. I know it's going to inspire a lot of people. And yeah, I'm excited to see what those next stories are. So go check out Now, how do you say your wife's name? Is it Nia?
Naya.
Naya.
Long I.
Okay.
Naya.
So John and Naya Davenport's the supply line.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, maybe we all figure out our supply line that we can be.
Yep.
All
Awesome.
right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wind it down. This has been another episode of Real Wealth Podcast where we talk about living the best life possible with the time we have left. It is sponsored by Steward Wright. Stewardship is our craft, and we thank you for listening. Check out John's movie link for the premiere, October 26th. Thank you, October 26th. And also Davenport Engineering. I don't know if you need any traffic engineering, but check them out.
Thank you, Michael.
All right.